After her 1937 film debut, Lana Turner worked really hard trying to shed the nickname that was given to her, the Sweater Girl. But as the 1940s were rolling in and the nickname was dissolving, she found herself faced with yet another one. Queen of the nightclubs, and her favorite ones were right here on the Sunset Strip. Would you believe that the Sunset Plaza has been family owned since 1892? The heirs to the family that bought the land and built on it still run it today, which is why I think it looks remarkably similar to how it did when development started back in 1924. And 15 years later, in 1939, Lana Turner and a publicist from MGM were photographed right here during Lana's Life magazine cover shoot. We're in the heart of the world-famous Sunset Strip, and it's probably my favorite stretch of the entire boulevard because, well, it's the largest part of the boulevard that's just so intact. You can see and feel several different decades when you walk around here. There have been upgrades and makeovers, and businesses have obviously changed, but its essence just hasn't faltered much. And this, to me, is the crown jewel of the plaza because it served as the Townsend agency in the pilot episode of Charlie's Angels back in 1976. That's all I ever think when I see it. It also appeared in an episode of The Rockford Files the year before, and it appeared on the big screen in Scarface in 1983 when it played the role of the Montana Travel Company. Scarface, they actually filmed a few things here at the Sunset Plaza. They used this building across the street as the Montana management in the movie, but in real life, it's the home of Montgomery Management. The Montgomerys, of course, would be the family who started it all. And I don't know the exact number, but I think there are around 55 businesses in total. Designer boutiques, retail shops, salons, sidewalk eateries. A long time, trendy stretch of the Sunset Strip where you can't walk too far without finding some connection to Lana Turner. Did any of you ever get to visit the Sunset Plaza Apartments before they were torn down back in 1987? If so, tell me everything. I'm just fascinated by them. They sat right in front of us where all those trees are. And I know it doesn't look it from here, but hidden among all of that landscaping is an 11,000 square foot estate built in the early 90s by a Mexican media tycoon. He died a few years later, and I believe his very wealthy son lives there today. They tried to sell it for $50 million a few years ago, but it eventually went off the market. It's a shame it even exists because it took the place of something really special, and it all happened in a very shady way. First off, they were the Sunset Plaza Apartments, and they were the only apartments ever designed by the one and only Paul R. Williams, a man whose work personifies Los Angeles. He was one of the first successful Black architects at a time when it was unheard of. He even learned to read blueprints upside down so that he could sit at his desk across from his white clients, instead of the usual practice of standing behind them, in case being too close to them made them uncomfortable. He ended up giving us the Beverly Hills Hotel look that we know today, and he also did the LAX theme building, in addition to countless homes and other buildings throughout this city. In the mid-1930s, a man named Frank Hoover hired Williams to build his dream apartment building here. The property itself was unusual in that it was completely round. There were 3 apartment buildings, and they only took up about 20% of the property. The rest of it was filled in with amenities like tennis courts and a swimming pool, and there was also a lot of lush landscaping. Each apartment was designed like a bungalow, with its own front door leading to the outside, no enclosed lobbies or hallways. Another thing that made it unique was that it was run like a hotel. There was a staff of people working around the clock. One of the tenants was a woman named Claire Engel, who moved in at $250 a month back in 1950, and she lived on the property until she was evicted in the early 80s. She was interviewed then, and she recalled that it had been run like a country club, fully furnished, carpeted, and draped. She said she always had fresh linens and never had to buy tissue paper. And the legend also goes that the apartments were once inhabited by Katharine Hepburn, Carole Lombard, Dorothy Lamour, Tommy Dorsey, and even James Dean, who apparently almost started a fire by accident. I don't know how much truth there is to that list of people, but I do know that Bernadette Peters and her dog Rocco were amongst the tenants given eviction notices along with Miss Engel, despite the fact that in 1980, the Sunset Plaza Apartments were actually given a historic landmark status. Somehow, though, some terrible people bypassed it and were able to get it all torn down. They failed in their attempts to build a high-rise, though, and eventually the land was sold for a mere $2 million to the family who owns it today. The property is visible in photos as well as a couple movies. In 1969, a film called Model Shop shows the apartment a few times, as well as a handful of other shots throughout the Sunset Plaza. But you can really see it up close and personal in the 1980 film American Gigolo. It's where Richard Gere's male escort character Julian lives. In the movie, though, it's given a fictional name, the Westwood Apartments. It's seen throughout the movie. A couple scenes even feature the iconic swimming pool as well as the fabulous double circular staircase leading down to it, a magnificent Paul Williams signature look. And it's also the staircase where Lana Turner and her Pekingese dog appeared on the cover of Life magazine, which came out in January of 1940. See, Frank Hoover, he was a very prominent photographer in LA, and ironically, his apartment complex became a hotspot for celebrity photos, especially starlets posing poolside. He would take his own photos here as well as rent the place out to studios and other photographers for various shoots, which is what led to Life magazine sending staff photographer Peter Stackpole to meet Lana and an MGM publicist named Jimmy Sarno to the property for the cover shoot. The newspapers, they mentioned that Lana, along with her mother Mildred and her on-again, off-again fiancé Greg Boutzer, had all attended a cocktail soiree thrown by Mr. and Mrs. Hoover here in 1939. This was sometime around the photo shoot here, where Stackpole took dozens of photos of Lana all around the property before taking her down to the Sunset Plaza for some candid shots down there. If you were in show business during the 1930s and 40s, you absolutely came to this intersection probably multiple times where the two sunsets meet, Sunset Boulevard and Sunset Plaza Drive. There have been many hot spots in the plaza over the years, and a man responsible for two of them back then was none other than our friend Billy Wilkerson, who discovered Lana Turner when she was just Judy Turner, sipping a Coca-Cola at the counter over at the Tops Cafe. And I told you at the very beginning of this tour that in addition to owning the Hollywood Reporter, Billy was also an entrepreneur, having a handful of establishments, two of which were across the street from each other. First, in 1934, he opened a very classy black tie, French-inspired club called the Café Trocadero, or the Troc, if you were a regular. This was not the original building. However, it was very recently built to look like the original buildings of the Sunset Plaza, specifically with those dormers there, with clocks, though, instead of windows. And if we were standing here a couple years ago, we'd be looking at a completely different structure, but at least this one has a little of the old vibe, although none of the old Troc vibe. That was special. At first glance, it appeared you were looking at a Parisian sidewalk cafe set in a colonial-style house. It had a striped awning that was constructed around the lamppost that once lit up the sidewalk here. A sidewalk that was sometimes blocked off for outside dining. There's one thing that is still synonymous with the Sunset Plaza, it's outdoor dining, and they were doing it here at the Troc over 90 years ago. It wasn't just a cafe, though. In fact, it was the Sunset Strip nightclub of the mid-1930s. And the French inspiration went beyond the giant neon lights that bore the club's name. And the inside was pretty spectacular. There were a few dining rooms, the main one where 400 people could be seated around a huge dance floor. There was also a more intimate dining room in the back that offered views that overlooked the city. There were smaller salons throughout the club. There was a more laid-back grill downstairs. There was also a VIP bar because Norma Shear complained once that there were no places for celebrities to go out in Hollywood without the presence of a camera. So Billy built one. Perhaps she didn't want her husband, Irving Thalberg, to be photographed gambling alongside some notorious mobsters. He wasn't the only one. Samuel Goldwyn, Carl Laemmle, and Daryl Zanuck took part in these infamous Saturday night poker nights. Today, though, the Cafe Trocadero is a retail store, but if you listen quietly, you can hear the roar of Hollywood's golden age entertainment that once filled the LA night sky. Billy Wilkerson essentially gave us the Sunset Strip nightclub scene as we know it. Early on, he put a velvet rope outside the closed doors, piquing people's curiosities. And it worked too, because within its first year open, the Troc became the place to be seen. If you were spotted here, there was a chance you could be mentioned in the Hollywood Reporter. Wilkerson was very, very savvy. He knew he could work his trade magazine into, well, the social world of show business. Jack Benny once said it was cheaper to have a successful night out at the Troc than it was to pay a publicist. Lana was discovered by Billy Wilkerson in 1937, the same year that he sold the Cafe Trocadero. The new owners, they completely renovated it, swapping out the colonial vibe for a sleeker, more streamlined look. And like Lana Turner, got a new identity when they officially dropped the cafe from its name. The new Troc, it was a little more mysterious, a little sexier, darker maybe, and this had everything to do with the new owners. Billy Wilkerson, well, suddenly a mysterious kitchen fire occurred and he ended up cashing in on an insurance policy before selling the Troc to a small group of people who included mob fellas Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen. This wasn't quite a super well-publicized fact back then, but it also wasn't a well-kept secret. Didn't deter any celebrities, and 18-year-old Lana was no different. The drinking age didn't really seem to matter. I don't know. Maybe they didn't check IDs back then, or maybe celebrities didn't count, but all these younger stars were always seen out at clubs. Lana, Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney. Louis B. Mayer would constantly remind them that they better not be photographed with drinks in their hands. Lana didn't always remember that rule, but she was never out of control or anything. She never made the papers for anything too scandalous happening because she was out at a club. She liked music, she liked dancing, she liked a cocktail or two, and she liked men. Sometimes platonic, sometimes romantic, sometimes studio arranged, sometimes authentic. And after her whirlwind marriage and divorce from bandleader Artie Shaw at the age of 20, she got right back into the dating scene pretty quickly, and good for her. She was young, she was gorgeous, and she loved to have fun. She hung out with all types of men. You know Robert Stack, scary Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries? Well, he was young and hot once, and Lana took advantage of that by going out and about with him a few times. She also went out on a couple dates with Howard Hughes, but she wrote that she found him boring and uninteresting and just couldn't follow through with it. Lana never saw the first incarnation of the Trocadero, but she remained a fan of Phase 2 until they closed their doors for good in 1947. And throughout the years, she was often seen here with friends, dates, and husbands. We'll be back here in a few minutes, but right now we have to leave the Sunset Plaza heading just a few blocks east down Sunset Boulevard because we have a reservation at Ciro's. Well, we missed our reservation by about several decades. Closed for life. But if I could bring back any nightclub in Hollywood, Ciro's would have to fight them all off for the #1 choice. And guess who opened it? Yup, Billy Wilkerson. In January of 1940, the same month that Lana's Life magazine cover hit the stands. Once the Trocadero was out of his possession, he got right back into the business by elevating the nightclub scene and just taking it to the next level with Ciro's. It was glamorous, it was decadent, it was referred to as the nightclub of the stars. Everybody dressed to the nines, formal wear. You didn't just roll in. Going to Ciro's was a night out, and you most likely danced until dawn. You came here to be seen and entertained. Billy Wilkerson, he had that magic touch when it came to starting truly iconic businesses, and Ciro's was a predecessor for what he and his mob friends would create when they gave us Las Vegas down the road. First, though, he had to perfect Ciro's, which he did, right here where the Comedy Store now stands, and Lana Turner was very vocal about this being her favorite place on the Sunset Strip. Ciro's was so big that on Academy Awards night, they would set up bleachers out here on Sunset Boulevard so that fans could sit and catch a glimpse of their favorite stars going in and out of the club following the ceremony. It was a hot after-party spot. It was a hot spot in general. One of the most absolutely revered clubs from Hollywood's golden age. Lana spent so much time here that the press started calling her the queen of the nightclubs. Louis B. Mayer, he didn't like this, and he called her into his office on several occasions, telling her to cool it. She'd just say, "Yeah, okay, sure, Mr. Mayer, sorry." Then a few nights later, she'd be back. Over the years, she'd come here with dates, friends, colleagues, and husbands. She wrote about Ciro's in her autobiography, which I brought, and from which I'll read. All right, you can look at some of the names that adorn the building, mostly comedians who have performed here, while I find our page where Lana writes about Ciro's. Ciro's was a favorite haunt. I'd walk up the steps and through the glass door and past the velvet rope that barred the less fortunates. And the head waiter would spring forward, "Ah, Miss Turner," and escort me in. I had a special table right by the stairs so I could watch the comings and goings. I'd head straight there, never glancing left or right. And then, when I was seated, I'd give the room a long casing, bowing to this one or blowing a kiss to that one. Silly, I guess, but fun. Ciro's was designed for dramatic entrances and exits because a long flight of stairs led down to the tables and dance floor. And at the top of the stairs, that's where the stars stopped, to let everyone see them come in. It was all part of the game. Everyone would stare, and you knew you were making an entrance. Entrance is all capped, by the way. I'd usually be dressed in something clingy, black or white, sometimes gold, occasionally red. I'd wear diamonds and a fur of some kind, draped over one shoulder. Often white fur, my favorite. Maybe ermine or silver fox, the fashionable furs at the time. Or sable. I had beautiful sables. I'd have jewels in my hair or flowers, and every hair was in place. But talk about an entrance. Hedy Lamarr holds the record for that one. One entrance she made at Ciro's is a vision I'll never forget. Hedy was at the height of her beauty with thick, wavy, jet black hair. With that stunning widow's peak, her face was magnificent. We all looked up, and there she was at the top of those stairs. She wore a cape of some kind up to her chin, and it swept down to the floor. I can't even remember the color of the cape, because all I saw was that incredible face, that magnificent hair, and a huge diamond, the most fabulous solitaire diamond on her forehead, just at the tip of her widow's peak. She was enough to make strong men faint. How the hell did she keep that diamond on her forehead? Was it pasted on? You couldn't tell. Later, Sidney Gilleroff told me that he had taken jet black wire, very fine, and woven it into Hedy's hair. He anchored it with a little spot of glue. But that diamond was absolutely real. It was breathtaking. Well, Hedy Lamarr was just one of many incredible people who made an entrance at Ciro's. And the list of people who performed, it's just as grand. There just aren't many people left who can give us a first-hand account of Ciro's life from the 1940s, but the man who helped manage it in the 50s, he booked talent and sometimes worked the door because of his large size, is still with us at 96. And just a couple years ago, he came on this show for a lovely sit-down chat. His name is George Slaughter, and his time here at Ciro's led him to booking Dick Martin and Dan Rowan, who, of course, he would go on to produce on his iconic show, Laugh-In. George is a phenomenal producer. He even produced Judy Garland's show. I'd really love for you to check out our interview here on my channel. He's just a fascinating man with so many great stories. Ciro's closed at the end of the 1950s, but reopened in 1965 as Ciro's Le Disc, a rock and roll club that had a guest list just as great as the nightclub days. I mean, Jimi Hendrix along with Ike and Tina Turner played here, so did Sonny and Cher. Honestly, too many to name. And at one point, they even called this place Art LeBeau's, after the name of the man who ran it. Then in 1972, Pauly Shore's parents opened what it is today, the Comedy Store. But get this, in 1974, Liza Minnelli had a party here celebrating her marriage to Jack Haley Jr., son of Jack Haley, who of course played the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz opposite her mother. A wild fact that I just still can't wrap my head around. They blocked out all the signage that said Comedy Store, and this place was transformed back to the old Ciro's just for a short period. I know this isn't a Billy Wilkerson documentary, but he did give the world Nightclubs, Las Vegas, The Hollywood Reporter, and Lana Turner, so we have to pay him enough respect to really quickly talk about La Rue. He opened it right here in 1944 while Ciro's was booming right down the street, and he did it cat-a-corner from his former Trocadero. Maybe intentional? There's not really much to talk about with La Rue, though, because, well, it was just great fine dining. Was never a scene, just good food, and people loved it all the way into the 1960s when it closed. It was really popular with the lunch set, which I can't not mention this movie, 1951's Hollywood Story. A lunch scene takes place at La Rue, and you see a few different shots of the Sunset Plaza. The movie's about a man trying to make a movie about the 1922 bungalow murder of a silent film director. Sound familiar? Well, it's loosely based on the murder of William Desmond Taylor, a tour I did a couple years back called Hollywood's First Murder Mystery, which of course you can see right here on my channel. Well, it looks as if we have a friend joining us on our tour. An adorable, looks like a baby coyote. We see them all the time in our neighborhood over in Griffith Park, but I can't say I've ever seen one on the Sunset Strip before. This is very new for me. Maybe this one's just a Lana Turner fan and wants to hear her story, like the squirrel who joined us back in Laurel Canyon. Well, I waited for it to leave, but I think it's interested in listening, so we'll just continue and see if it follows us. You want to hear all about the Mocambo nightclub? Oh, nope. Guess not. Not interested. Well, hopefully you are, because that is the last club that we have to talk about. I hope you're up for some dancing, because we are going to one more club. And guess what? It wasn't opened by Billy Wilkerson, but it was right next to the Trocadero. It was called the Mocambo, a Latin-themed club that had a legendary 17-year run beginning in 1941. Charlie Morrison and Felix Young opened the Mocambo the year after Ciro's opened. It closed in 1958 following the sudden death of 57-year-old Charlie. He was a former talent agent, so he had the celebrity connections, and instantly the Mocambo became a hit. Lucy and Desi were such big fans of the club that, in addition to his performing here, they recreated the Mocambo's look for the Tropicana, Ricky Ricardo's fictional nightclub on I Love Lucy. And it's also remembered for a story from the mid-50s involving Marilyn Monroe. She had become a big fan of Ella Fitzgerald after hearing her music on the radio, and in 1954, she got to introduce herself to Ella after finally getting to see her live on stage. The two ladies, they became friends, and Marilyn was shocked to learn that Ella couldn't get booked here at the Mocambo. There was a race war happening in the country, but Dorothy Dandridge and Eartha Kitt had both been booked here, so why not Ella? Well, the Mocambo just didn't think she was glamorous or beautiful enough and didn't want her, despite the fact that she had just come off of a very successful tour on the East Coast as well as in Europe. And Marilyn, the biggest star in the world, was so upset that she called up the club. She told them that if they booked Ella, she would personally sit in the front row of every show. I don't even think Marilyn finished the sentence before the Mocambo jumped on this offer. They gave Ella the stage for a couple of weeks, and Marilyn kept her word. And joining her would be Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, and a host of other celebrities. But the truth is, Ella didn't need them. She sold this place out, and it was because of her talent, her extraordinary talent. The Mocambo's ghost now sits amongst a gym and some shops, but I wanted to try and give you a little idea of just how big the property is. All these nightclubs, they go back much further than they look. You can kind of get an idea how they held such large dance floors as well as all these other rooms within the clubs. I don't know why, though, they seem to have blocked off the city view the way they have. It's really the best part about being on this side of the Sunset Strip, and they don't seem to be taking advantage of it very well. All right, back we go to 1942, when Marilyn Monroe was still 8 years away from anyone even knowing her name. The biggest blonde star in the world was Lana Turner, especially having just come off of her second successful film with Clark Gable called Somewhere I'll Find You. And after the picture, MGM sent Lana on a war bond tour around the country in support of the troops. Just about every star in Hollywood was doing their part to assist in the war, and among one of Lana's many stops was Wallace, Idaho, her hometown. She arrived to a huge banner across the town square saying, "Welcome home, Lana." With her on this part of the tour was her mother, Mildred, and the two of them were quite shocked to see that just about every person in town had gathered outside of their hotel room just to meet and talk to Lana. Many of them suddenly having all of these great memories to share of when she was a little girl, pretending they knew her when. Mildred and Lana were very gracious to the fans, but in disbelief at all of the attention. And Lana wrote in her book here, she said, "It had only been 5 years since I had first walked down a Warner Brothers street wearing a tight-fitting sweater. During those short years, I had appeared in about 15 movies, had been married and divorced, and had become America's glamour queen. And today, the bank and schools were closed because I was back in town. The movies could do all of this. What power they had to fire up the public's imagination." One night in 1942, after Lana had returned from her tour, she attended a party that her agent Johnny Hyde was throwing here at the Mocambo. Usually a circumstance like this would have had Lana arriving on the arm of some handsome actor, but tonight she did something rare. She rolled in alone. She hadn't been there very long before a tall, handsome man asked her to dance. He was in the VIP area of the party, and she had seen him chatting with Johnny, so she decided to accept his offer. That, and she found him very attractive. Soon into their dance, she found him witty and charming as well. His name was Stephen Crane, and after several minutes of getting to know each other's small talk, Lana learned that he was from Indiana and that his family was in the tobacco business. Well, like everyone at Mocambo, Ciro's, and the Troc, the two danced and danced into the wee hours of the morning. And Lana did something even rarer. When Mocambo closed, she agreed to let Stephen drive her home. And in typical Lana fashion, she fell for him, and she fell hard. Last time it happened, she found herself on a Las Vegas-bound airplane to get married, and this time, she found herself on a Las Vegas-bound airplane to get married. However, this time, according to Lana, Stephen waited 3 weeks to ask her for her hand in marriage, but according to Stephen, he waited 3 months. Either way, on July 17th, 1942, Lana Turner and Stephen Crane were wed before Judge George E. Marshall. Now, if that name sounds familiar, that is because it was the same judge who married her and Artie Shaw just a couple years before. Tying the knot for the second time, the legend goes that during the ceremony, Lana said, "Tie it tighter this time, Judge." And for this quick marriage trip to Vegas, Stephen brought his publicist friend, Alan Gordon, and Lana brought her good friend, actress Linda Darnell. That name might be familiar to you if you watched my docu-series on Carol Burnett or listened to our interview when she was on my show. Linda was one of the first movie stars little Carol ever met. She got her autograph outside of the Pantages Theater, and to this day, Carol Burnett can still duplicate Linda's signature. Linda, she remained a really good friend of Lana's until her tragic death in 1965 when she got trapped inside of a house fire. So awful. But in the summer of 1942, it was all fun and games as she served as the newlyweds' witness. And after the wedding in Vegas, everyone flew back to Los Angeles for a wedding party thrown by Mildred Turner with the help of Lana's pal Judy Garland at the family house on McCulloch Drive that has long since been demolished. This time, however, there were no surprises. Everyone in Lana's life knew about Stephen Crane, and they welcomed him into her life with open arms. For 45 years, the restaurant Chin Chin stood right in front of us. They just closed last year, but had quite a run since they opened in the early 80s. And I remember after I moved here in the 90s, the super popular Rosie O'Donnell show came to LA to tape a couple of episodes, and she mentioned that she was obsessed with their Chinese chicken salad, so I decided to come try one, and I spotted Shannon Doherty picking up food to go. I think Charmed had just debuted too. Such fun times. I still love their salads. There's a Chin Chin in Studio City and Brentwood. Le Petit Four, they just closed too. They were here for, I think, 44 years. This plaza used to be quite a hub for industry power lunches. And these parking spots out front here would be just lined with the fanciest cars you've ever seen. But this building, it looks quite similar to how it did when Lana was snapped in front of it during that Life magazine shoot. Looks like part of it's for rent right now. Maybe one of you can come open a beauty salon here. Just like Gina Montana's beauty salon, as seen in Scarface. first few months of marriage were great, completely blissful, according to Lana. Stephen's temperament, it didn't come anywhere near that of Artie Shaw's, and these two really seemed to enjoy one another's company. Then they were hit with a bombshell. Turned out that Stephen wasn't technically divorced from his first wife. This sent Lana into an absolute spiral. Seems kind of silly talking about it today, but you have to remember, this was 1942, and, well, there were bigamy laws that could have gotten the couple into trouble, and there was Lana's Catholic school upbringing, which taught her that it was a sin to live with a man or sleep with him outside of marriage. So, in her panic, she decided the best thing to do would be to have the marriage annulled. Stephen, of course, pleaded and begged. Really, this wasn't anything that he did maliciously. It's really a boring story because it all comes down to the laws just being different in California versus Indiana, where all of this went down with his ex-wife. Should have really just been a quick cleanup of a misunderstanding, but to make matters more complicated was the fact that the couple found out they were expecting a baby. And look, our Mocambo queen lives on. This colorfully decorated sidewalk pretty much marks the end of the Sunset Plaza, just before the Sunset Strip winds down to Book Soup and what I'll always think of as Tower Records down there. I wanted to come show you a building, though, because its structure looks remarkably similar to how it did in the 1940s, which is always fun to encounter on a tour, especially when you know that the person we're talking about has also definitely seen this same building. In addition to an annulled marriage and a pregnancy, Lana also had to go back to work. And it'd be one thing if she was cast in some rich melodrama where she could channel all of this drama from her personal life, but no, she was cast in a romantic screwball comedy opposite Robert Young. But this movie shows just how great at her job Lana was, because you'd never know what was going on in her world. MGM knew. Unfortunately, so did some of the press and gossip columnists, but to make light of this, MGM decided to call the movie slightly dangerous, kinda poking fun of the bad press that she may have been getting. They were saying, "We know she's trouble, but we're here for it, so enjoy the comedy." Also, we'll throw in a scene where her character is seen at a counter serving milkshakes, sort of a tongue-in-cheek reference to Lana's discovery, reminding everyone just how loved she was. And it worked, too. The movie did well, and this scandal, it did nothing to dissuade the public's love of Lana Turner.
Give me back my glasses. Oh! Oh, excuse me. What am I, a man or a mouse? A mouse.
Peggy.
Do you know
Peggy!
I haven't the vaguest idea who he is.
Jimmy? Jimmy? Peggy, you're lying. You know you are.
Scarcely know him.
I couldn't hate you, darling. Unless you turned out to be a female impersonator.
A lot of times, these old stars have just as much off-screen drama as most of the characters that they play on screen. That was certainly the case throughout most of Lana's life. And as we continue, I have to show you this. Well, it's really a treat. And I wonder how many people know about this. Even if you've come to the plaza a million times, it's easy to miss it because there are several parking options and entrance points, but it's really just a special tribute for those of us who love the golden era, the plaza embracing its history with photos of the Trocadero days. And back to the drama. So, Stephen Crane, he went above and beyond trying to get Lana back. Unlike Artie Shaw, he wanted to have a child with Lana. He actually ended up swallowing pills and driving his car off the road right outside of the house where Lana was living with her mother in a very big, dramatic attempt to win her back. Lana, she collapsed at one point and was taken to the hospital where she spent several days. The doctor didn't think her baby was going to survive, so he advised her to terminate the pregnancy. Lana said, absolutely not this time. She did that with Artie and wasn't going to go through that again, no matter what. The doctor basically said, fine, keep it, but it's probably not going to survive the pregnancy. She didn't care. She was going to try. And after some heavy thinking, she decided that, well, in 1940s America, the best decision would be for her to stay with Stephen and raise the baby. So, on March 14th of 1943, 27-year-old Stephen Crane and 22-year-old Lana Turner drove across the Mexican border into Tijuana and remarried one another. Judge Marshall was nowhere to be found this time. They even picked a random man off the street to serve as a witness and called it a day. But Lana felt so much better about being legally married, and truthfully, she liked Stephen. Probably even thought that she loved him. He fixed the situation, took care of all the legalities, but there was still something off. He really wasn't going to work. He kind of just stayed home. Went out gambling often, and for a businessman, didn't really tend to any kind of business. Lana was a little concerned, especially considering she paid for just about everything. Well, 4 months into the marriage, Lana and her mom Mildred were taking a walk outside their neighborhood when Lana's water broke. But she was only 7 months pregnant and was now facing the most dramatic moment of her very young 22 years.